in order for us to really appreciate this Devar Torah, I just want to take a poll. How many of you, earlier in your life, lived in a small Jewish community where, there was like trouble making a minyan in the community? Has anyone ever? Where did you live?
Saratoga Springs, New York.
Saratoga Springs. Good. Yes, you.
Winnipeg.
Winnipeg. There you go. Well, yes.
Mexico City.
In like a suburb of Mexico City. Yeah. Benoni, South Africa. Okay. So I've also, Karen and I have had our share of living in small communities. We lived in San Diego. We lived in Allentown, Pennsylvania. And there's a certain charm, a certain benefit that you get out of knowing that you need to make the minyan, that you need to help make sure that the mikveh stays open, that some of these things, some of these advantages of living in a small community, you don't always have when you live in a larger cosmopolitan, flourishing Jewish community. But a lot of times living in a small community makes you realize I'm losing out, especially when you're raising children, right? In other words, any of you who have lived in a small Jewish community and you've raised children, sometimes it's a real challenge as an Orthodox Jew because maybe my kids are the only frum kids in their class. Or maybe there may not be a proper day school, they're not getting a proper education and things like that. And so a lot of times people sort of like earn their stripes, they put in their time for parnasa reasons or for whatever other reason. They'll go to a small community and eventually they make their way to the big time, to Thornhill and to New York or wherever it is. And when I read that, because of my own personal experiences, maybe I'm reading too much into the pasuk, but I sort of read this in Yaakov Avinu's life in Parshas Vayishlach. He's had this confrontation with Esav. He spent 20 years with Lavan, wrestles Esav's angels, and now finally he can just take a sigh of relief. I've been out in the hinterlands for a couple of decades. I faced Esav. Whew. Okay, finally, I'm in the promised land, literally. I'm in Eretz Yisrael, I'm in the land of Canaan. I can raise my children with Kedusha. There's more Kedusha here, there's an intrinsic holiness, and I'm sure that I'll be able to find what I'm looking for my children, for my family. This is the place where I belong. And certainly one way of understanding why Yaakov finally says to Lavan, it's time for me to leave last week, is because he realizes my children are in spiritual danger in being in an environment such as Lavan. And I got to go back to Eretz Yisrael to raise my family with a wholesome holiness that only Eretz Yisrael can provide. And yet, what's the ultimate irony of that story? This pasuk that we read, Vayavo Yaakov Shalem Ir Shechem. Yaakov comes, he's a complete man. He's totally complete. He's content because now he feels that I've arrived. Yes? I've arrived. I've come all the way to Thornhill. And this is like there's a Sobeys and kosher food everywhere and minyanim galore and dafyomis galore and everything's great here. Right? Rashi says, Shalem begufo, shenit rape mitzalato. He was complete physically because even though the angel injured him, he was healed by this point. Shalem b'mamono, he was financially complete. Shelo chaser klum mikol oto daron. He wasn't lacking, even though he had given Esav so much away. And shalem b'torato, shelo shachach talmudo b'veit Lavan. He was complete spiritually in his Torah knowledge. That even though he spent 20 years with Lavan out in a remote, spiritually remote place, he never forgot his Torah. Never forgot who he was, never forgot his spiritual essence. And now he arrives, Shalem. He's finally made it. And yet, what's the very next part of the story? Vateitze Dina. Dina goes out, and she discovers a whole new world. Because just because you're in the Holy Land doesn't mean that everybody's holy in the Holy Land. And she has negative influences. And she finds people in her classroom who are introducing her to different things that aren't so pure. and she meets some guy. She meets a guy named Shechem, and they hit it off, and before you know it, she's violated. And this, unfortunately, is the liability of coming to a place where you think is a fortified community, a holy place. You take it for granted. Of course, I got the best school, I've got the best shul, I've got the best this, I've got the best that. What could be better? And sometimes when you least expect it, because you've fortified yourself in the holy shtetl, some things can go wrong. Things can go wrong, even in places of great holiness. There will always be elements of spiritual danger or impurity, no matter where you go. And we're witness to this today. Sometimes the strongest Jewish communities contain the children who go off the derech the most, who leave Yiddishkeit the most, because for some reason there's something there that's not appealing to them. And they're curious, and they venture out, and they want to discover, and they want to fit. And the family says, no, this is where we belong. We finally came to the holiest place. What do you... And there's this miscommunication, this misunderstanding, and that's what happens to Dina. She goes out, and she finds this whole new world. She's excited about it. And it leads her down labyrinths and pathways that are unfortunate paths. And how do I know this? Because, and this is really where you have to look carefully at the end of the story. Yaakov is very upset at Shimon and Levi. I mean, I'm assuming that you know the sort of the basic framework of the story. What happens is that Dinah goes out and she's violated by Shechem. He takes advantage of her. And then the family finds out about it, and they're very upset. And Shimon and Levi have a plan to really take vengeance upon this clan of Shechem that have so badly treated their sister that they said, okay, fine, we'll let you marry Dinah, and we'll take care of you, and everything will be fine. Just, there's only one small thing that we ask you to do is just the men should be circumcised so that we're all the same. And they say, okay, and they all agree to circumcision. And then, when everyone's recovering in pain, they go in the middle of the night and they wipe out the entire clan. Okay? Now, Yaakov Avinu's reaction is not as a proud father. He's not happy with what they've done. He says, this is not the time. The time yet has not arrived for the Jews to be members of the IDF. I appreciate what you did, and I know it was an act of vengeance, but the timing is all wrong. We have not arrived yet to be able to say that we are the starkers, we are the strong ones within this society. Do you realize what the repercussions, the reprisals I'm going to have to suffer as a result of what you've done? The Ramban even tells us that there were ancient texts that he knew of, we don't really know what these texts are, that discuss that historically there were reprisals against Yaakov and his family, and he actually had to fight and stave off other armies that wanted to avenge the deaths of Shechem and their clan. So Yaakov was really not happy with what they had done. And what was their response? Their response was, and this is in Perek Lamed Daled, Pasuk Lamed Aleph, in source number 3. Vayomeru, and they said, Hachizona ya'aseh et achotenu. 5 words. They said, shall our sister be made into a prostitute? So that was what they said, rhetorically. Shall our sister be made into a prostitute? End of story. We don't see Yaakov's response. He seemingly doesn't have a response. And that's the end of the story. And we move on from there. God says to Yaakov, move on to Bethel, and that's where you're going to live from now on. But here's what's very cryptic. Rashi gives a very cryptic explanation of et achotenu, our sister. Shall our sister be treated like a prostitute? Yat achatana, which is Aramaic for our sister. So Rashi essentially says, et achotenu means yat achatana, means our sister in Aramaic. Can anyone tell me what Rashi is doing? Now Rashi usually comes for a purpose. He comes to explain something to us that we didn't necessarily understand from the text. What in the world is Rashi coming to explain? He's essentially just translating the Hebrew into Aramaic. What in the world is he doing? This is quite perplexing. Because, we always want to know what Rashi's project is. What is he doing? And as a matter of fact, Rabbeinu Bechaya, who's a later medievalist, a later Rishon, quotes Rashi and essentially confesses, I have no idea what Rashi is saying. Source number 5. He says, Hachazona ya'aset achotenu, katav Rashi ketargumo yatachatana. Rashi basically tells us the Aramaic translation of our sister, means our sister in Aramaic. Velo hevanti zeh. I have no idea what he's doing. I have no understanding, which is quite an honest thing. If Rabbeinu Bechaya can tell he doesn't understand Rashi, I don't feel so bad, because a lot of Rashis I don't understand. So what's going on over here? We need to try and understand at least what Rashi's doing. Fortunately, we have a commentary from Rabbeinu Asher, the Rosh, who's a great Talmudic commentary, but also has a shorter commentary on the Chumash. And the Rosh tells us as follows. Hachazona ya'aset achotenu. Piresh Rashi, hefker ketargumo yatachatana. Shall our sister be treated as just hefker, which is no one, just completely free to all? And the Aramaic translation of our sister is yatachatana. Pirush. So he says, let's explain what Rashi means. Perush leperusho, rather. An explanation to his commentary is as follows. Ma ba lechadesh tirgem et yat. What is Rashi, after all, coming to explain? He's telling us that the word et means, which is a preposition, or sort of like a, what's the word I'm looking for? The words the. Right? Is it a pronoun? I'm not sure. But it's a word. The word et, by the way, doesn't have any translation. It's very difficult to translate. He says the word et means yat. Yesh lomar. Hadin imo. Rashi is correct. The al korchach tzarich letargem et yat. She'im tetargem im mashma hayamit naheg im achotenu kemo im isha zona aval hi atzma lo ye'aseh zona mufkeret. Lekach tirgem yat kolomar oseh ota hefker. And he goes on from there. Would anyone like to venture a translation of what the Rosh has just told us? Anyone? Anyone want to try? Okay, here's the way I'm understanding it. There are two ways to translate et in this pasuk. Hachazona ya'aset achotenu could be translated as, shall our sister be treated like a prostitute? Or it could be translated as, shall our sister be treated as a prostitute? What is the difference between those two? The difference is a very subtle difference, but a very important difference. Dinah was mistreated by Shechem, that we know. But what became of Dinah herself? How did that traumatic event affect her, if at all? A girl could be raped and be extremely traumatized, but at her core, she is still the chaste, pious, innocent young lady that she was before the event took place. That's im achot. That would be if you translate the word et as im achotein. Shall she be treated like a prostitute? We know she's not a prostitute, but he treated her as if she were one. And that's what's offensive. But not that Dinah has essentially changed. But Rashi says, Yat Achatana means that through his association with her, he's turned her into a prostitute. Because she has essentially changed as a result of that encounter, that whole relationship with him. She was so debased, She was so traumatized, she was so abused, that she was made to feel like she is a cheap commodity, like she's just a piece of flesh and worthless, and has no sense of self-esteem anymore, no sense of piety or holiness anymore. Because of the way he treated her, she's internalized that. And that's the greatest offense. And that's why Yaakov had no response to that. How do you respond to that? It's one thing if it's a one-time offense that we can overlook and move on, because Dinah is still Dinah. But that's the point, Father. Dinah's not Dinah anymore. She's not the same sister that we had, the innocent sister that we had when we were living in Lavan's house, where you thought there would be terrible things that would happen to her because of the negative influences. And so you brought us all to this really holy place. Guess what happened? Dinah turned into someone who's not our sister anymore. That's the greatest tragedy. So that's what Rashi is coming to teach. And I believe that that is why the epilogue of that story, sort of the aftermath of that story, is in the next few psukim, at the beginning of Perek Lamed Hey, in source number 7. What does Hashem say to Yaakov? Kum alei Beit El v'shev sham. Yaakov, I understand you wanted to live in Eretz Yisrael, but even within Eretz Yisrael, even within the holiest of places, you're going to have bad neighbors. Go to Beit El. That's where you should live. You'll encounter better neighbors there. Make a mizbeach there, and give thanks to Hashem for when you were fleeing from your brother Esav and you were allowed to survive. And then, what does Yaakov say to his family? Vayomer Yaakov el beito, ve'el kol asher imo. He says to everyone that's with him, not only his children, not only his family, he's developed a clan, he's got servants and everything. Hasiru es Elohei hanechar asher b'sochechem, v'hitaharu v'hachalifu simlo sechem. Remove all of the false gods that are within you. Purify yourselves and change your clothes. So what does that mean? Simply meant, we've accumulated a lot of schmutz along the way, get rid of it. Akedas Yitzchak, again, a great medieval commentary that's not studied enough, but he writes in source number 8 like this. He says, Uvichlal divarav sheyizaharu mehatuchunot haraot asher hema Elohei hanechar asher bikirbam. He says that's what Yaakov meant. All of the bad qualities and character traits that we picked up when we were by Shechem, you've got to get rid of that. I realize now what a tragic mistake I made in allowing us to pitch our tents. I thought anywhere we go in Eretz Yisrael will be okay. But the fact of the matter is that no matter how holy the place looks, there could always be darkness lurking in the shadows. And if you're not careful, you can't take it for granted just because you're in a holy community that your kids are going to be okay. And that's, to me, one of the most important lessons of the story. We strive all our lives to grant our children the most wholesome of environments to make sure that they're going to be healthy. But if we're not vigilant and we're not careful to make sure where they're going, what they're doing, to answer their questions and to entertain their concerns, and it doesn't matter how holy the environment is, eventually they'll find something that appeals to them that is antithetical to our whole value system. And we have to be careful. We have to know that we haven't arrived just because we're in Thornhill or just because we're in Yerushalayim or in Beit Shemesh or wherever we find ourselves. There are negative influences no matter where we go. And we just have to keep tabs. We have to keep tabs on our family members. We have to know how to deal with concerns or questions that may arise. And we can't assume that just because we're sending them to a fine yeshiva or a fine school, that everything will be okay. Life doesn't work that way. Parenting is a very, very difficult task. Questions, comments? Yes?
Do we know what became of Dinah?
Well, there's different midrashim. The Medrash tells us, Rashi quotes this, that Dinah didn't want to come home. She felt so disgraced, she felt so unworthy, she felt so contaminated, that she felt, I belong with Shechem. You know, you have this today, unfortunately. There's an organization, I think it's called Yad La'achim or Lev La'achim. I always get the two mixed up. Is it Lev La'achim? Yad La'achim. I get the two mixed up all the time. Their whole mission is to save Israeli girls who have gotten themselves Arab boyfriends, and then they're brought over to the Arab villages, and they're converted to Islam, and their lives are a living hell, as you can imagine. In a Muslim society, women are very mistreated in Palestinian villages. And they go in and they try to infiltrate and save these girls and bring them back to their Jewish homes and their families. You know, but why does that happen? Because a girl feels, I made these terrible choices for myself, and it's too late for me. I'm beyond redemption, you know. And so Shimon, her brother, promised her, "You're not beyond redemption. I will marry you." And only after she got that assurance did she agree to come back to the family. And if you go follow the Medrash, and it's to the next step, the Medrash says that Osnat, who would eventually become Yosef's wife, actually was Dinah's daughter.
Dina's daughter from Shem.
Well, it's not clear whether it's her daughter from Shechem or whether it's her daughter from Shimon. But either way, she was a nice Jewish girl. Anyway, have a good day, everybody. And we'll see you in a few weeks. I'm sorry again for the interruption. See you in a few weeks. Thank you.
Okay, so turn it off. There's going to be a